How does this story reflect on women's rights? The story is a powerful critique of the denial of women's rights under patriarchal and religious legal systems. It exposes how women are treated as property, denied agency in marriage, subjected to forced marriage, and deprived of legal recourse. The narrative shows that women's voices and choices are systematically ignored or overridden by male guardians, religious authorities, and the courts, and that resistance is often met with violence, legal punishment, or social ostracism. The story advocates for justice, autonomy, and dignity for women, and condemns the use of religion and law to justify misogyny and abuse. Frida and Sami have decided to visit the house of the Imam of the mosque, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, to confront him about the forced marriage contract he performed between Intisar and Hassan without her knowledge or consent. They wanted to present evidence that the marriage was conducted under false pretenses, without the bride's presence or agreement, and to demand that the Imam annul the marriage, as it was both illegal and immoral. It takes Frida and Sami a full day to locate the Imam's house. The Imam owns 4 residences, one for each wife, and they have to try each address in turn, facing delays and refusals at each location before finally finding him at the 3rd house after 7 hours of searching. When Frida and Sami visit the house of the Imam of the mosque to discuss the forced marriage contract, the narrative provides a vivid description of the Imam and his environment. He is referred to as Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, the Imam of the largest mosque in Gadaref city. He owns 4 residential addresses, one for each of his 4 wives. Each wife has her own home, children, servants, pets, and other property. This polygamous arrangement means that finding him requires some luck as he moves between these homes. When Frida and Sami finally locate him, they are made to wait outside until he is ready to receive them. The process is formal and somewhat intimidating, with a servant interrogating them about their names, addresses, and the purpose of their visit. Upon entering, they find Maulana Sheikh Marzouk deeply engrossed in reading the Holy Quran, seated comfortably in an armchair. He is described as having a long beard, a large turban, and a white robe, which gives him an air of holiness and righteousness. The Imam's manner is initially formal and somewhat aloof. He closes his Quran, takes out his prayer beads, and invites them to sit down. He is polite but maintains a sense of authority and distance. The room itself is described as simple but dignified, reflecting his status as a religious leader. The atmosphere is one of solemnity and tradition, with religious texts and symbols present. During the conversation, the Imam is courteous but firm, referencing religious law and tradition to justify his actions regarding the marriage contract. He is not easily swayed by emotional appeals and relies heavily on religious doctrine and precedent. This scene highlights the Imam's authority, his adherence to tradition, and the formal, almost bureaucratic nature of religious leadership in the context of the novel. The Imam's demeanor during the visit by Frida and Sami has a significant psychological and emotional impact on both of them. Formality and authority. The Imam, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, maintains a highly formal and authoritative presence. He is deeply engrossed in religious ritual when they enter, and his manner is polite but distant. This creates an atmosphere of solemnity and hierarchy, making Frida and Sami feel like supplicants rather than equals. Intimidation and discomfort. The Imam's reliance on religious doctrine and his unwillingness to engage emotionally or personally with their plight leaves both visitors feeling intimidated and powerless. His focus on legalistic and doctrinal responses, rather than empathy or understanding, heightens their sense of frustration and alienation. Frustration and helplessness, as the Imam justifies the forced marriage contract using religious law and precedent. Frida and Sami experience a growing sense of helplessness. Their emotional appeals are met with bureaucratic and theological arguments, making it clear that personal feelings and justice are secondary to religious procedure in his eyes. Emotional impact. The Imam's demeanor reinforces the oppressive structures they are fighting against. Frida becomes more determined but also more aware of the enormity of the challenge, while Sami feels the weight of institutional authority pressing down on their hopes for justice and autonomy. In summary, the imam's formal, doctrinal, and emotionally detached demeanor serves to reinforce the power imbalance and the rigidity of the system, leaving Frida and Sami feeling frustrated, intimidated, and more acutely aware of the obstacles they face. The imam's daughter, Samia, is described as a teenage girl who is shy, overweight, and considered virtuous and well-educated in religious matters. When Sami is introduced to her as a potential groom, he politely but firmly rejects the marriage proposal, stating that he has already chosen another girl as his life partner. Samia is deeply hurt by this rejection. She runs out of the room in tears, hiding her face, and is emotionally devastated by Sami's direct response. Here are direct quotes from the text describing the imam of the mosque when Frida and Sami visit his house and enter his room, as well as their interaction and the imam's demeanor. On entering the imam's house and room, when Frida and Sami stood in front of the first home of their religious leader, who had married Hassan to Intisar, they knocked on the door once and waited, but no one answered. They knocked on the door the second time, and they did not answer their knock either. They tried the third time. When there is no response the third time, they decide to leave. They walked a few steps and suddenly they heard a man's voice calling them back. They understood that the caller was behind the door and had heard them knocking previously, but wanted to test their religious commitment. When he was completely satisfied that they would obey the religious advice of the Prophet not to knock on the door more than 3 times, he answered, "Who's there at the door?" "We are 2 visitors who came to see our virtuous Maulana, Sheikh Marzouk," answered one of the visitors in a sweet female voice. "May I know your name, address, and the purpose of your visit?" "My name is Frida Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber. I live in Hillat Al-Maidan, house number 277, Cemetery Road. The purpose of our visit is to discuss a serious matter with our virtuous imam regarding my sister Intisar." After the interrogation, the guard said, "Please wait until I get the permission of our blessed sheikh." The 2 visitors waited another 10 minutes before the door finally opened. According to Sami's watch, it's 5 p.m. therefore, 7 long hours spent on searching for the virtuous polygamist man, the imam, Sheikh Marzouk. Then the servant directed the visitors to the room where the blessed man is. As they entered, they saw His Eminence Maulana al-Mubarak sitting comfortably in an armchair with the Holy Quran open before him. The religious leader is deeply engrossed in reading the Muslim holy book. At first, the visitors hesitated to bother the blessed man. His long beard, large turban, and white robe revealed his inner holiness and righteousness. But their urgent matter cannot wait until Maulana has finished reading from cover to cover the entire Holy Quran. On the Imam's demeanor and interaction. "Peace be upon you, our blessed Imam," said the 2 visitors in unison. They repeated this phrase 3 times before Maulana said, "Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you." Then he closed his copy of the Quran and took out his prayer beads and told them to sit down. "Are you Sami, the son of the righteous man, Mr. Osman Al-Taib?" Maulana said happily. "Yes, me. Your father is a good man. Never miss a day of weekly Friday prayers. He is a great blessing for our city. He built the largest mosque in our city, the women's ward in the civil hospital, the girls' high school, the religious library, and the charity house for poor children and orphans." Suddenly, one of the visitors interrupted the praise of the blessed Imam. Sami said, "Excuse me, sir, I know all these things. I would be glad if you didn't mention them to me again. I know, my son, that only Satan praises himself, but that your father's good deeds sometimes compel us to speak of them before others. If we have 10 good men like your father, our city would be a perfect place or utopia. I would be extremely glad if you would stop talking about my father and listen to our problem. I am at your service, my blessed son. Tell me what your problem is." On the effect of the Imam's demeanor. Before the 2 visitors began to recount their tragedy, they heard a sweet female voice saying, "Dad, may I bring a juice drink for your guests?" "Yes, you can be my blessed daughter. Bring cold drinks. Today we have a great visitor." In general, women are not allowed to enter the men's section of any Muslim house, but on that day the restriction is relaxed because of the great visitor, Sami. Anyway, that day came a young teenage girl with a tray full of lemonade bottles in her hands. She is a pretty young woman, but overweight. She appears to the guests to be a shy and boring girl. Sammy guessed she was the girl his father was talking about. He quickly compared her to his beloved fiancée. He saw so many differences between the two girls. Intisar is bold, intelligent, and 100 times more beautiful than the imam's daughter, Sumaya. When the girls served drinks, her father asked her to greet the guests. She only shook hands with the VIP male visitor, and thus breached other religious restrictions. According to Islam, a woman may not touch the hand of a stranger. Moreover, the virtuous girl on that day does not cover her entire body with the abaya, veil, or niqab, which is what the imam's daughter usually must do. She wears a short dress and a very transparent sari and veil. Therefore, the important male visitor has seen her face, her legs, her thighs, hips, and her large buttocks, which is another grave Islamic violation. She willfully ignored Frida as if she isn't a female like herself. Maulana Al-Fadil proudly said, "This is my blessed daughter, Sumaya Marzouk." The two visitors are silent. "I think your father may have talked to you about her marriage proposal to you." "Yes, he did, but I am sorry to say that I have already chosen another girl as my future life partner." Sammy's direct response felt like a hammer on Maulana's head and like a poisonous dagger in his daughter's heart. The daughter at once ran out of the room to hide her tears. Perhaps Sammy would not have spoken so harshly if yesterday's incident had not happened. Believing that the imam of the mosque had a hand in the sinister plot, the lover felt justified in avenging his grievous injury and violating his fiancée's right to choose her life partner. The profound impact of Sammy's words made Maulana suddenly harsh and rude in his speech as well. There is complete silence for a while. Frida said, "Well, can we talk now about our problem?" "What problem are you talking about?" Maulana shouted angrily. "We have come to tell you that some bad guys have deceived you in this city. That is why you conducted my sister's marriage contract illegally with a man without her knowledge, consent, or presence. So, we want you to scrutinize the whole thing and see how they deceived you, and when you are convinced, you must annul the illegal marriage contract." "What kind of marriage contract are you talking about, and who are the people?" "The alleged guardian of my sister is Omar Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber. My sister's name is Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber. The man who functioned as a pseudo-husband is called Hassan Majub al-Hilali." "When did this marriage take place?" "Not sure of the exact date, but most likely a few days ago." On the imam's response to their request. Then the virtuous imam took out his marriage record from a drawer on a table near him and began to read it silently. After reading, he raised his eyes and said seriously, "What is wrong with this marriage contract?" The bride's guardian was present. The husband was present. Witnesses were present. Their names, addresses, and signatures were taken by me as a recognized Mazoon who conducted the halal Islamic marriage. "Who is the girl's guardian?" Frida asked. "Her elder brother, Mr. Omar Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber. He was her guardian because she lost her father 10 years ago. He showed me his father's death certificate. I got a copy. That villain is not her guardian, but her sworn enemy. My mother Sarah and I are her only guardians. Listen, woman, if you have any enmity with your brother, it is none of my business. I can't go to every house and see if there's a quarrel between brothers and sisters. If you can prove to me that Omar is not the girl's older brother, or that her father is still alive and of sound mind, I will annul the marriage contract on the grounds of deceit. If the girl Intisar comes herself to you and tells you that Omar is her sworn enemy, will you be satisfied?" "May I ask a personal question?" "Yes, you can." "How can you describe a man who brought a good husband like Hassan Majub al-Hilali to your sister as her sworn enemy? Marriage is a personal matter, and therefore my sister has the absolute right to choose the person she wishes to marry. Besides, I am Intisar's older sister, and I am her sole guardian. A woman is guardian for another woman. There is no such thing in the law of the Book of God, the Holy Quran, and the hadiths of his gracious messenger Muhammad. May God bless him and grant him peace. According to the Shafi and Maliki schools of Sharia, which derive directly from the Holy Quran and the blessed Sunnah of our infallible Prophet, A woman is completely incompetent to enter into a marriage contract herself or for another woman, even though her guardian must authorize her to do that. A father or guardian brother can contract the marriage of his virgin daughter or his virgin sister without asking her consent, whatever her age. I strongly protest and reject such an unfair legal law. How can God's law force a girl to marry someone she doesn't love, and that too without her knowledge or prior consent? Frida exclaimed. Frida and Sammy presented several pieces of evidence to the Imam. Correspondence and documents showing that Intisar had always refused Hassan's proposals and had made clear her wish to marry Sammy. Proof that Omar, Intisar's half-brother, was not her legitimate guardian and had acted out of rivalry and for personal gain. Evidence that the marriage contract was signed without Intisar's knowledge, presence, or consent, and that her signature was never obtained. Testimonies and letters indicating that Frida, as the eldest sister, was the true guardian and had rejected Hassan's proposal on Intisar's behalf. The Imam responded by insisting that the marriage contract was valid according to Sharia law because Omar, as the eldest male, presented himself as the guardian and provided the necessary documentation, including their father's death certificate. He dismissed Frida's claim to guardianship, stating that Islamic law does not recognize a woman as a guardian for another woman, and maintained that the contract was legal since all formalities, guardian, groom, witnesses, were present. The Imam refused to annul the marriage unless it could be proven that Omar was not the legitimate guardian or that the father was still alive. The Imam's arguments were as follows. According to Sharia law, a male guardian, wali, is required for a woman's marriage, and a woman cannot be her own guardian or act as guardian for another woman, regardless of her age or education. Omar, as the eldest male sibling, presented himself as Intisar's guardian, provided their father's death certificate, and fulfilled all legal requirements for the marriage contract. The Imam claimed he could not be expected to investigate family disputes or enmities between siblings. His duty was to ensure the presence of a guardian, groom, and witnesses. He argued that unless Frida could prove that Omar was not the legitimate guardian or that their father was alive, the marriage contract was valid and could not be annulled. The Imam dismissed Frida's protests as the result of her university education and feminist ideas and accused her of challenging the law of God and the Prophet. He concluded that if Frida and Sammy had any further objections, they should take the matter to the Sharia court, as he had fulfilled his religious and legal obligations in performing the marriage. The implications of the Imam's response are significant, both for the characters involved and for the broader critique of the legal and religious system depicted in the novel. Validation of patriarchal and legal authority. The Imam's refusal to annul the marriage, despite evidence of coercion and lack of consent, reinforces the authority of male guardianship and the supremacy of Sharia law over individual rights, especially those of women. By insisting that only a male guardian can authorize a marriage and dismissing Frida's claim as a female guardian, the Imam upholds a system that denies women agency over their own lives and bodies. Dismissal of evidence and individual circumstances. The Imam's response shows that, within this system, documentary evidence and the actual wishes of the woman are secondary to formal legal procedures and male authority. Even when presented with proof that the marriage was conducted without Intisar's knowledge or consent, the Imam prioritizes the appearance of legal compliance, the presence of a male guardian and witnesses, over the reality of injustice. Religious justification for injustice. By framing his arguments in religious terms and accusing Frida of challenging the law of God and the Prophet, the Imam provides a religious justification for practices that are shown to be deeply harmful and unjust. This response demonstrates how religious authority can be used to legitimize and perpetuate systemic abuse, making it extremely difficult for victims to seek redress or protection. Entrenchment of systemic oppression. The Imam's stance implies that the system is self-protecting and resistant to reform. Victims are told to take their complaints to the Sharia court, but the court itself is depicted as complicit in the same injustices. This creates a closed loop in which appeals for justice are redirected back into the very system that caused the harm, leaving women like Intisar with no effective recourse. Broader social and psychological impact. The imam's response has a demoralizing effect on those seeking justice, reinforcing a sense of powerlessness and despair. It also signals to the community that challenging patriarchal or religious authority is futile, and that women's rights and voices will not be recognized or protected within the prevailing legal religious framework. In summary, the imam's response in the novel is a powerful illustration of how religious and legal authority can be used to uphold patriarchal control, dismiss evidence of injustice, and perpetuate systemic abuse against women, while offering no meaningful avenue for redress or reform. The reason Sharia law does not accept Frida as the sole guardian of her two sisters, Intisar and Firdaus, is rooted in the traditional interpretation of Islamic jurisprudence, fiqh, as applied in Sudan and similar societies. According to the imam, only a male relative, such as a father, brother, or another male in the paternal line, can act as a legal guardian, wali, for a woman in matters of marriage. The law explicitly excludes women, even mothers or elder sisters, from acting as guardians for other women, regardless of their age, education, or family role. This is based on the view that women are incompetent to contract marriage for themselves or for others, and that the presence and consent of a male guardian is a religious and legal requirement for a valid marriage contract. As a result, Frida's claim to be the legitimate guardian of her sisters is rejected by the imam and the Sharia court, even though she is their closest and most supportive family member. The second conspiracy that the imam, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, reveals to Frida and Sami during their confrontation is that, on the same day and with the same guardian and witnesses, he also performed a marriage contract between Firdaus, Intisar's younger sister, and Osman al-Taib, Sami's father. This means that, in addition to the controversial marriage between Intisar and Hassan, a second marriage was arranged again without the girl's knowledge or consent between Firdaus and an elderly, powerful man, further entangling the sisters in a web of forced marriages orchestrated by male relatives and religious authorities. The imam presents this as a matter of fact, almost as a boast, and uses it to demonstrate the power and reach of the patriarchal system, as well as to intimidate Frida and Sami by showing that their family is even more deeply enmeshed in these conspiracies than they realized. How does Frida react when she hears about the second conspiracy? Frida is overcome with rage and horror upon hearing about the second conspiracy. She physically attacks the imam, spitting on him, slapping his head, and kicking his marriage record and the Quran before Sami restrains her and pulls her out of the room. Her reaction is one of utter outrage at the abuse of religious authority and the violation of her sister's rights. Imam Maulana Sheikh Marzouk. Character summary. Position and presence. The imam is described as the religious leader of the largest mosque in Ghadaref city. He is a figure of significant authority, both spiritually and socially, and is deeply involved in the enforcement of Sharia law and community norms. When Frida and Sami visit his home, they find him in a setting that reflects his status. He is seated comfortably, reading the Quran, dressed in traditional religious attire, and surrounded by an atmosphere of formality and ritual. His residences are divided into separate houses for each of his 4 wives, highlighting his polygamous household and the patriarchal structure he upholds. Demeanor. The imam's demeanor is one of authority, self-assurance, and, at times, condescension. He is initially polite and formal, greeting Frida and Sami with the expected courtesies, but his tone quickly becomes didactic and defensive when questioned about the legality and morality of the marriage contract he performed. He is quick to cite religious law and tradition, and he does not tolerate challenges to his authority or the established order. When Frida and Sami press him about the forced marriage, he becomes harsh, dismissive, and even angry, accusing Frida of being an atheist or a communist for questioning Sharia law. Attitude towards women and law. The imam is a staunch defender of patriarchal and religious authority. He believes in the absolute right of male guardians to arrange marriages for women without their consent, and he sees the questioning of these practices as a threat to the social and religious fabric. He is dismissive of Frida's arguments about consent and women's rights, and he refuses to acknowledge the harm caused by forced marriage. His attitude is rigid, legalistic, and uncompromising. Impact on Frida and Sammy. The imam's demeanor and responses have a profound effect on his two visitors. They are frustrated and angered by his refusal to listen or consider their perspective. His intransigence and reliance on religious authority leave them feeling powerless and alienated. The encounter reinforces their sense of injustice and motivates them to seek other avenues for redress, such as legal action and public advocacy. Community response. Hostility and resistance. The broader community is depicted as highly conservative, with strong opposition to any challenge against established norms, especially regarding marriage, guardianship, and women's autonomy. When Frida and Sammy attempt to confront the imam and challenge the legality and morality of the marriage contract, they are met with suspicion and resistance, not only from religious authorities, but also from neighbors, relatives, and even some family members. Social isolation. Intisar and her family experience increasing isolation as a result of their resistance. The text describes how neighbors and classmates shun Intisar, labeling her a bad girl for falling in love before marriage. The family is subjected to gossip, ostracism, and pressure to conform. Complicity and gossip. The community is complicit in upholding the patriarchal system. Many people, including relatives and neighbors, reinforce the idea that a girl's fate is not her own and that resistance to forced marriage is shameful or dangerous. There is a sense that the entire society, family, religious leaders, police, and courts, is complicit in maintaining these metaphorical prisons for women. Threats and violence. The text also references the threat of violence, including honor killings, for girls who are perceived to have transgressed social norms. There is a real fear that challenging the system could lead to severe consequences, including physical harm. Direct quotes from the text. Intisar felt like everyone hates her now. So, she expects that people's bitterness may one day lead some to stone her to death or chase her out of town. I became like the unwanted girl or untouchable woman in Hindu society. Many families forbade their daughters to socialize with Intisar. These parents believe that her bad behaviors may affect their daughters as well. Her girlfriends and classmates at school said Intisar is deceived by her beauty. She is like a butterfly that jumped into a fire believing that the fire would add to her beauty. Some of her family members and other girlfriends advised her to accept the marriage proposal she received from the family of Hassan Majub al-Hilali, but she also refused to accept this advice. The community's complicity and gossip further isolate Intisar, reinforcing her status as a victim and outcast. Summary. The community's response is overwhelmingly negative, marked by hostility, isolation, and complicity in upholding oppressive norms. Frida and Sammy's efforts are not only unsupported, but actively undermined by the social environment, making their struggle for justice and autonomy extremely difficult and dangerous. Summary of their next steps. After their frustrating and ultimately fruitless conversation with the imam, Frida and Sammy take decisive steps to continue fighting for Intisar's rights and to challenge the injustice of the forced marriages. Here's a summary of their next actions, with supporting details from the novel. Frida and Sammy's next steps. Confront Hassan and his family. Frida intends to confront Hassan and his family directly, making it clear that Intisar is not property to be traded or sold, and that she has the right to choose her own life partner. She is prepared to face any social backlash or threats from the powerful men involved. Mobilize family support. Frida asserts her role as the sole guardian and protector of her sisters, especially in the absence of their father. She rallies her mother and younger siblings, making it clear that she will not allow the injustice to stand and that the family must unite to defend Intisar's rights. Preparedness for sacrifice. Frida is willing to sacrifice her own job, savings, and even her future prospects to ensure her sister's freedom and dignity. She sees this as a moral and familial duty. Direct quote from the text. Frida's plan is bold, multi-pronged, and driven by a sense of justice and familial responsibility. She is prepared to confront religious and legal authorities, challenge powerful men, mobilize her family, and make personal sacrifices to fight for Intisar's right to choose her own destiny. She is prepared to take the case through the legal system to have the marriage declared void and to protect Intisar from being forced to live with a man she did not choose. As soon as the four friends reach the house of the politician, they are welcomed by the Man of Wonders. The Man of Wonders in the novel is Fada Karar, who is also referred to as the Wonder Man in the narrative. He is the personal secretary of Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali. He is a colorful, notorious character known for his womanizing, his irreverent humor, and his willingness to speak openly about taboo subjects, especially regarding marriage, sex, and social customs. His views on his late father's marriage addiction. Fada Karar explains that his late father was a womanizer and a marriage addict who managed to marry a total of 9 wives, despite Islamic law allowing only 4 at a time. He describes how his father circumvented this restriction by using the law of release and possession, divorcing one wife to marry another, then repeating the cycle so that he could have many wives over his lifetime, though never more than 4 simultaneously. This is explained in a somewhat satirical and irreverent tone, highlighting the absurdity and loopholes in the system. Direct quote. The Man of Wonders says, "My father had 9 wives." Sulla says to him, "I don't think you can justify this either. According to Islam, a man can have a maximum of 4 wives. How did your father manage to marry a total of 9 women?" "It's a simple matter," said the Wonder Man. "My father was a womanizer. Women were his weakness. Whenever he saw a beautiful woman, he would pursue her until he added her to his harem list. After having 4 wives, he saw another beautiful young woman. He wanted to marry her, but he was hindered by the restrictions of Islamic law that you mentioned. That means 4 wives at once. So he went to Maulana, the imam of the largest mosque in our city, and shared his problem with him. The wise religious leader gave him good advice, which helped him not only to have a 5th wife, but to ascend to the 9th. What did Maulana advise him to do? Sulla inquired. He simply taught him the law of release and possession. Maulana told my father that through that law he was able to marry 14 wives and beget many sons, daughters, and grandchildren. He said because of their large numbers that he did not know the names of all his descendants. Can you explain this law to us? Sulla asked. Although Sulla holds a law degree, he felt he encountered a law he had never heard of before in law school. "Yes, I can," said Wonder Man seriously. "I'll give you an explanation. Suppose Mr. X already has 4 wives. Let's call them wife number 1, wife number 2, wife number 3, and wife number 4. Suppose this good gentleman sees a beautiful young girl and desires her beauty as well as the lusts of her sexy body. So, he wanted to have sex with her, but Sharia, which stipulates that only 4 wives at a time, stood in his way. In this case, he would either restrain his passion or apply the law of release and possession. According to this law, he could divorce one of his 4 wives and marry as he wished. It is preferable to divorce the first wife because she is the eldest and therefore the least desirable. When he marries his new wife, he does not name her as his 5th wife because she becomes a substitute for the first wife. Again, he would not refer to the new wife number 6, but the replacement of his 2nd wife, and so on. In this way, the cycle can be repeated once, twice, thrice, or even 10 times according to the financial situation, physical strength, and sexual ability. This is what Al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib used to do. He was a notorious womanizer and a marriage addict. He married 200 wives and countless slave girls and captives of war women of the defeated infidels. He used to divorce 4 women at once and marry 4 virgin girls at the same time instead of them. Moreover, my father was working as a muhalil in the Sharia court. This passage not only illustrates the man of wonders' irreverent and humorous approach to social and religious norms, but also serves as a satirical critique of the loopholes and contradictions in the application of Sharia law regarding marriage. How the Man of Wonders explains the work of the muhalil to Frida and the 4 friends. The Man of Wonders, Fada Karer, explains that the muhalil is a man who, according to Islamic Sharia, marries a woman who has been divorced 3 times by her Muslim husband, has sexual intercourse with her, and then divorces her, thereby making it religiously permissible for her to remarry her original husband. He describes how his own father worked as a muhalil in the Sharia court, sometimes marrying and divorcing several thrice-divorced women in a single week, and profiting from this role by charging the ex-husbands for his sexual services. The explanation is given with a satirical and irreverent tone, highlighting the loophole and the transactional, even exploitative, nature of the practice. The implications of the muhalil's role. The role of the muhalil has significant social and ethical implications. It exposes a legal loophole in Islamic marital law that can be exploited for personal gain, turning a deeply personal and emotional matter into a transactional and sometimes humiliating process for women. The practice can commodify women, reduce marriage and divorce technicalities, and perpetuate cycles of exploitation and abuse, as women may be forced to marry and have sex with a stranger solely to become eligible to remarry their original husbands. This not only undermines the dignity and autonomy of Muslim women, but also highlights the patriarchal and legalistic manipulation possible within the system. The role of the muhalil in Islamic marital law. Definition and function. The muhalil is a man who, according to traditional interpretations of Islamic, Sharia, law, temporarily marries a woman who has been divorced 3 times, a thrice-divorced woman, by her husband. After a man has divorced his wife 3 times, Islamic law prohibits him from remarrying her unless she has first married another man, and that marriage has been consummated and then ended, either by divorce or the death of the new husband. The muhalil's role is to marry the woman, have sexual intercourse with her, consummate the marriage, and then divorce her, thereby making it religiously and legally permissible for her to remarry her original husband. How the role is practiced. The Man of Wonders, Fada Karer, explains that his own father worked as a muhalil in the Sharia court. He would sit in front of the court with a sign advertising his services as a legalizer of thrice-divorced women and the legalization of her private parts. Whenever a woman needed to be legalized for her original husband, she would be married to the muhalil, who would have sex with her, sometimes just once, and then divorce her. This process could be repeated many times, and the muhalil would receive payment from the ex-husband for this service. The practice is described as being transactional, sometimes even farcical, with the muhalil marrying and divorcing several women in a single week, and profiting from the desperation of couples who want to reunite after a triple divorce. Social and ethical implications. The role of the muhalil exposes a legal loophole in Islamic marital law, turning what is supposed to be a serious religious and moral restriction into a technicality that can be circumvented for a fee. It commodifies women, reducing them to objects in a legal process, and can be deeply humiliating and traumatic for the woman involved, who must have sex with a stranger solely to return to her original husband. The practice is open to abuse and exploitation, and is often criticized for undermining the dignity and autonomy of women, as well as the spirit of the law itself. Satirical critique. In the novel, The Man of Wonders explains the muhalil's work with a satirical and irreverent tone, highlighting the absurdity and hypocrisy of the system. He even jokes about the muhalil's signboard advertising the legalization of private parts, and the fact that his father enjoyed the work because it allowed him to have sex with many women and make a fortune from desperate ex-husbands. Here are direct quotes regarding the work of the muhalil, as explained by the Man of Wonders, Fada Karer. on the definition and process. My father was sitting on a chair in front of the Sharia court with a large board hanging prominently over his head. In large words, wrote the parser or legalizer of thrice divorced women and the legalization of private parts. According to Islamic law, if a man divorces his wife 3 times, he cannot marry her again unless she marries another man, and that man also divorces her after having sex with her at least once. My late father, may God have mercy on his soul, used to do this marital task because he loved women. Sometimes, he married himself 7 of the 3 times divorced wives in 1 week. In this way, he not only got many women to have sex with him, but made a great fortune from the ex-husbands of those 3 times divorced wives. He was a smart man. The role of the muhalil has a profoundly negative effect on women's autonomy, as described in the novel. Loss of agency. The muhalil process is initiated not by the woman, but by her former husband and the religious/legal system. After a triple divorce, if the couple wishes to reunite, the woman is required by law to marry another man, the muhalil, consummate the marriage, and then be divorced before she can remarry her original husband. This means her body and marital status are subject to the decisions and actions of men and the legal system, not her own will. Commodification and humiliation. The woman is reduced to a transactional object in a legal loophole. The muhalil's role is often performed for payment, and the act of marrying and having sex with a stranger solely to fulfill a legal technicality can be deeply humiliating and traumatic for the woman involved. Her consent is not the focus. Rather, the process is about fulfilling a legal requirement for the benefit of her former husband. Perpetuation of patriarchy. The system reinforces patriarchal control over women's bodies and choices. The woman cannot independently decide to return to her former husband. She must first be used by another man, as dictated by religious law and enforced by male authorities. This strips her of autonomy over her own relationships and sexuality. Exploitation. The muhalil, as described in the novel, can exploit the situation for personal gain, marrying and divorcing multiple women in a short period and profiting from the desperation of couples. This further objectifies women and exposes them to potential abuse. The role of the muhalil deeply undermines women's dignity in several ways, as depicted in the text. Objectification and instrumentalization. The woman is reduced to a mere instrument in a legal process. After being divorced 3 times, she cannot return to her original husband unless she marries another man. The muhalil has sexual intercourse with him and is then divorced. This process is not about her wishes or well-being, but about fulfilling a legal technicality for the benefit of her former husband. The Muslim woman's body and sexuality become a means to an end, rather than being respected for her own right. Humiliation and trauma. The requirement that a woman must have sex with a stranger, the muhalil, in order to return to her original husband can be deeply humiliating and traumatic. It is a process that is often transactional, sometimes even commercialized, with the muhalil receiving payment for his role. The woman's consent and emotional state are secondary to the legal requirement, and she may be forced to endure this ordeal against her will. Loss of autonomy and agency. The woman has little or no say in the process. The decision to use a muhalil is typically made by her ex-husband and the religious/legal authorities. She is compelled to participate in a process that treats her as property to be transferred, rather than as a person with dignity and rights. Social stigma. The process can expose the woman to gossip, shame, and social ostracism. Being passed from one man to another, even temporarily, can damage her reputation and sense of self-worth, especially in conservative societies where a woman's sexual history is closely scrutinized. In summary, the muhalil's role strips women of dignity by treating them as objects in a transactional process, exposing them to humiliation, denying them agency, and subjecting them to social stigma. Here is a more detailed explanation of how the muhalil's role affects women's dignity, with reference to the text in the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife. 1. Reduces women to legal objects. The muhalil's role turns a woman into a mere instrument for fulfilling a legal technicality. After a triple divorce, if a couple wishes to reunite, the woman is required to marry another man, the muhalil, have sexual intercourse with him, and then be divorced before she can remarry her original husband. This process is not about her wishes or well-being, but about fulfilling a legal requirement for the benefit of her former Muslim husband. Her body and sexuality become a means to an end, rather than being respected for her own right. 2. Humiliation and trauma. The requirement that a woman must have sex with a stranger, the muhalil, in order to return to her original husband can be deeply humiliating and traumatic. The process is often transactional, sometimes even commercialized, with the muhalil receiving payment for his role. The woman's consent and emotional state are secondary to the legal requirement, and she may be forced to endure this ordeal against her will. The text describes the muhalil as someone who not only got many women to have sex with him, but made a great fortune from the ex-husbands of those 3 times divorced wives. 3. Loss of autonomy and agency. The woman has little or no say in the process. The decision to use a muhalil is typically made by her ex-husband and the religious/legal authorities. She is compelled to participate in a process that treats her as property to be transferred, rather than as a person with dignity and rights. The text satirically notes that the muhalil's work is so routine and impersonal that he would sit in front of the court with a sign advertising his services as a legalizer of thrice-divorced women and the legalization of their private parts. 4. Social stigma and shame. The process can expose the woman to gossip, shame, and social ostracism. Being passed from one man to another, even temporarily, can damage her reputation and sense of self-worth, especially in conservative societies where a woman's sexual history is closely scrutinized. The transactional nature of the muhalil's work, as described in the text, further compounds the sense of indignity and shame for the woman involved. The Man of Wonders, Fada Khair, provides a pointed, almost satirical, proof that Frida is not Omar by highlighting the obvious differences in their identities, genders, and family relationships. He directly challenges the confusion by stating that Frida is clearly a woman. She is the older sister of Intisar, while Omar is the older brother. He points out that Frida and Intisar share the same father and mother, live in the same house, and have the same uncles, aunts, and even the same maid and dog, making them real sisters. Omar, on the other hand, is the son of their father's first wife and is a half-brother, not a sister. The Man of Wonders uses physical and social markers to reinforce the distinction. Frida has big boobs, long hair, and you have a pussy, not a cock, while Omar is a man. He even mocks the idea of confusing the two by saying, "From head to toe you look like a girl, not a boy. Even your voice is a female voice, not a male one." He further ridicules the notion by referencing their family dynamics and the rivalry between the children of the two wives, which is a recurring theme in the novel. This rivalry, he argues, is precisely why Omar would never be Frida, and vice versa. Direct quote. "Now you said that this girl has the same father as you. Does she have the same name as your mother?" Frida says, "Why do you want to go into this endless and useless talk again? We have the same father, the same mother, the same house, the same uncles and aunts, the same maidservant, the same dog. In short, we are real sisters, and I am her older sister and her only guardian. If what you said is true, then there is confusion in your relationship. According to my information, this girl has a guardian whose name is Omar, not Frida. I do not think that the virtuous imam of the biggest mosque in town Maulana Sheikh Marzouk confused Omar with Frida. In addition, I was present at the time of the conclusion and signing of the marriage contract and functioned as one of the 3 witnesses. So, you are not her guardian, Omar. You will never convince me that you are a brother and not the sister of my chief's son's bride. From head to toe you look like a girl, not a boy. Even your voice is a female voice, not a male one. You have big boobs, long hair, and you have a pussy, not a cock. Shut up your mouth, you tramp and impolite." In summary, The Man of Wonders proves Frida is not Omar by emphasizing their different genders, family roles, and physical characteristics, and by ridiculing the confusion with blunt, physical, and social evidence. The significance of the Man of Wonders, proving that Frida is not Omar, lies in clarifying the legal and social authority over Intisar and her sisters, and in exposing the manipulation and absurdity of patriarchal guardianship in the context of forced marriage. Key points of significance. Guardianship and legal authority. By proving that Frida is not Omar, the Man of Wonders is highlighting that Frida, as a woman, cannot be recognized as a legal guardian for her sisters under the prevailing interpretation of Sharia law. Instead, the law defaults guardianship to Omar, the male half-brother, regardless of his relationship or intentions. This exposes the gender bias and the exclusion of women from positions of authority over their own family members. Satirical critique of patriarchy. The proof is delivered in a satirical, almost mocking tone, pointing out the obvious physical and social differences between Frida and Omar. You have big boobs, long hair, and you have a pussy, not a cock. This ridicule serves to highlight the absurdity of the legal system that ignores the actual relationships, character, or suitability of guardians, focusing solely on gender. Exposing the system's flaws. The scene underscores how the system can be manipulated by those in power, male relatives, religious authorities, and how women's voices and choices are systematically dismissed. The Man of Wonders uses blunt, physical, and social evidence to show that the law's logic is not about truth or justice, but about maintaining male control. Impact on women's rights. The proof is significant because it demonstrates that, under this system, women like Frida, even if they are the most responsible or caring family members, are denied the right to protect or represent their sisters. This has direct consequences for the autonomy, safety, and dignity of women like Intisar, who are left vulnerable to exploitation and forced marriage. In summary, the Man of Wonders, proving Frida is not Omar, is a pointed critique of the patriarchal legal system, exposing its gender bias, its disregard for women's agency, and the ways it enables the abuse and commodification of women under the guise of religious or legal authority. The implications of the Man of Wonders, proving that Frida is not Omar, are significant for both the legal and social context of the story. Legal authority and guardianship. The proof directly challenges the legitimacy of Frida acting as guardian for her sisters under Sharia law. By establishing that Frida is not Omar, and thus not a male, the Man of Wonders reinforces the patriarchal legal structure that only allows male guardianship. This means that, regardless of Frida's closeness, responsibility, or intentions, she is legally excluded from protecting or representing her sisters, leaving them vulnerable to the decisions and interests of male relatives. Exposure of gender bias. The proof exposes the gender bias inherent in the system. The law does not consider the actual relationship, character, or suitability of the guardian, but only their gender. This highlights how women are systematically denied agency and authority over their own lives and those of their female relatives, regardless of their competence or familial bonds. Satirical critique of the system. The Man of Wonders uses blunt, even mocking language to point out the absurdity of confusing Frida and Omar, emphasizing physical and social differences. You have big boobs, long hair, and you have a pussy, not a cock. This ridicule serves as a satirical critique of a legal system that ignores reality in favor of rigid, patriarchal rules. Impact on women's rights and dignity. The implication is that women, even when they are the most responsible or caring family members, are denied the right to protect or represent their sisters. This perpetuates their vulnerability to exploitation, forced marriage, and abuse, and reinforces their status as legal minors or property within the system. Reinforcement of patriarchal control. Ultimately, the proof upholds the patriarchal order, ensuring that control over women's lives remains in the hands of men, and that women are excluded from meaningful participation in legal or familial decision-making. In summary, the Man of Wonders, proving Frida is not Omar, is not just a technical clarification. It is a powerful commentary on the exclusion of women from authority, the rigidity and absurdity of patriarchal law, and the ongoing denial of women's rights and dignity in the society depicted in the novel. Here is a detailed explanation of the law of release and possession, as described by the Man of Wonders in the novel. The law of release and possession. The law of release and possession is a concept explained by the Man of Wonders, Fata Karer, when discussing his late father's marriage addiction and how his father managed to marry more than the 4 wives allowed by Islamic law at one time. Here is a summary of how this law works, based on the text. Islamic law limitation. According to Islamic Sharia, a man can have a maximum of 4 wives at any one time. Circumventing the limit, when a man with 4 wives desires to marry a 5th woman, he cannot do so unless he divorces one of his current wives. Release. The man divorces one of his 4 wives, usually the eldest or least desirable, to release her from the marriage. Possession. He then marries a new woman, who takes the place of the released wife. The new wife is not counted as a 5th wife, but as a replacement for the one who is released. Cycle. This process can be repeated multiple times. Each time the man wants to marry a new woman, he divorces one of his current wives and marries the new one as a replacement. In this way, a man can marry many women in his lifetime, but never have more than 4 at the same time. Historical example. The Man of Wonders claims that his father, who was a muhallil, a man who legalizes thrice-divorced women for remarriage, used this law to marry up to 9 women in his life. He also references the historical figure Al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was said to have married hundreds of women by repeatedly divorcing and marrying new ones. Summary of the visit to Hassan's house. After the traumatic events surrounding the forced marriage of Intisar, her family and friends, led by her older sister Frida, decide to confront Hassan and his family directly. The group consists of Frida, Intisar's friend Sami, Salah, and his girlfriend Firdus. Arrival and reception. The group arrives at Hassan's house, which is described as imposing and guarded, reflecting the family's wealth and political influence. They are received not by Hassan himself at first, but by his father's personal secretary, who acts as a gatekeeper and screens visitors before allowing them to meet the head of the household. The secretary is skeptical and somewhat dismissive, questioning the legitimacy of Frida's claim to be Intisar's guardian, and challenges the group to prove their relationship and intentions. The confrontation. After a tense wait, the group is eventually allowed to meet Hassan's father, Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali, a prominent politician. Frida and the friends present their case, explaining that Intisar was married off without her knowledge or consent, and that her true guardian is Frida herself, not her half-brother Omar. Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali listens, but is largely unmoved, defending the legality of the marriage and insisting that everything was done according to Islamic law and social custom. He recounts his version of events, claiming that Hassan was heartbroken by Intisar's rejection and that the marriage was arranged to save his son from despair. He also asserts that the marriage was approved by Omar as the legal guardian, witnessed by the imam and other community elders. Key points of the discussion. Frida challenges the legitimacy of the marriage, arguing that Omar is not a suitable guardian and that Intisar's consent was never obtained. The friends question the ethics and morality of the arrangement, highlighting the emotional and psychological harm done to Intisar. Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali remains steadfast, insisting that the marriage is valid and that Intisar now belongs to his son Hassan as his legal wife. The conversation becomes heated, with both sides refusing to back down. Frida vows to fight the marriage in court and to protect her sister's rights, while Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali warns them not to interfere further. Aftermath and next steps. The visit ends without resolution, but Frida and the friends are more determined than ever to pursue legal action. They plan to gather evidence and seek the support of sympathetic community members and legal professionals. Frida is especially resolute, declaring that she will not rest until Intisar's freedom is restored and the forced marriage is annulled. Direct quotes from the text. Here are some direct quotes from the relevant section. Frida said, "Our problem was caused by your son, Hassan. For that reason, we want you to stand up for your son before it's too late. As I told you, I am not an intellectual like you. I need more explanation. Your son Hassan conspired with our half-brother and sworn enemy Omar and married my sister Intisar without her knowledge and consent. This is what you call a problem. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I would never call this a serious issue. It's just a misunderstanding, and if you listen to me, I'm sure your doubts will be cleared. Frida said, well, we came here with only one purpose, and that is to tell you that what you and your son and our brother Omar did is an evil plot. So as long as I am alive, none of you can touch a single hair of my sister's head. Now let the criminal Omar come to our house and take my sister Intisar by force to your selfish and cowardly son, Hassan. Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali said, of course, we do not want to challenge you, but as a man of the government, I must tell you that your sister Intisar has become the legal Muslim wife of my son Hassan. Community response. The community, as represented by Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali and his household, is largely unsympathetic to Frida and the Friends' efforts. They view the marriage as legal and proper and see the objections as disruptive and misguided. The broader community, including religious and political leaders, tends to side with tradition and the authority of male guardianship, making Frida's challenge an uphill battle. Here is a detailed summary of how the father of Hassan explains to Frida and the four friends how and why he arranged the marriage of Hassan and Intisar. When Frida and the four friends confront Hassan's father, Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali, about the forced marriage between Hassan and Intisar, he provides a lengthy and calculated justification for his actions. He begins by recounting the situation from his perspective. His son Hassan was deeply in love with Intisar, but she did not reciprocate his feelings and instead loved Sami, the son of a wealthy businessman. Hassan became distraught, stopped eating and sleeping, and fell into a state of despair, which alarmed his parents. Seeking a solution, Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali was advised by a good man to approach Intisar's older half-brother, Omar, who, under Sudanese Islamic law, has been considered her legal guardian after the death of their father. Omar expressed his own disapproval of Intisar's relationship with Sami and agreed to marry her off to Hassan instead. Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali then consulted with Mr. Osman al-Taib, Sami's father, who also opposed the relationship between Sami and Intisar and preferred his son to marry someone of higher social status. After confirming the support of Omar and Mr. Osman al-Taib, Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali approached the Imam of the mosque, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, who confirmed that, according to Islamic law, Omar had the right to act as guardian and marry off his sister. The marriage contract was then performed in the mosque with Omar as guardian, Hassan as groom, and the Imam officiating, with witnesses present. Throughout his explanation, Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali frames his actions as being motivated by compassion for his son's suffering and by a desire to uphold social and religious norms. He insists that the marriage was conducted legally and properly, with all necessary parties and documentation, and that any objections from Intisar's mother or sisters are irrelevant under the law. He also downplays the emotional and ethical implications, focusing instead on the formalities and the supposed well-being of his son. In summary, Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali justifies arranging the marriage by emphasizing his son's emotional distress and need for resolution, leveraging the legal authority of Omar as guardian under Sharia law, securing the support of other influential men, including Mr. Osman al-Taib and the Imam, asserting that all legal and religious procedures were followed, regardless of Intisar's wishes or consent, presenting the marriage as a solution to family honor and social order, rather than a violation of Intisar's autonomy. Direct quotations. When Frida and the four friends confront Hassan's father, Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali, about the forced marriage between Hassan and Intisar, he provides a lengthy and self-justifying explanation. He claims the marriage was arranged out of concern for his son's well-being and as a response to social and familial pressures, rather than malice or disregard for Intisar's wishes. Summary of his explanation. Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali recounts that his son, Hassan, was deeply in love with Intisar and became despondent when she refused his proposal and instead loved Sami. Hassan's heartbreak led his family to seek a solution to save his life. He describes approaching Intisar's half-brother, Omar, who, as the eldest male, was considered her legal guardian under Sudanese law. Omar, motivated by rivalry and jealousy, agreed to the marriage and facilitated the contract without Intisar's knowledge or consent. Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali insists that the marriage was conducted according to Islamic law, with the presence of a guardian, witnesses, and the imam, and that all formalities were observed. He frames the act as a benevolent intervention to prevent further tragedy and to uphold social norms. Direct quotations from the text. On Hassan's heartbreak and the family's motivation. My son loves a girl I've never seen even once. He claimed that she is the most beautiful girl in town. He said that the girl also loves him, but she said she did not want to marry him until she finished her studies. She told him to wait for her to finish her studies. He waited for her for 3 long years. Eventually, she dumped him and fell in love with another boy who was much more handsome and richer than him. He came to me and said, "Dad, my life is over." When he was on his deathbed, someone came forward and gave us good advice. He suggested we go and meet the girl's older brother. He told us that the girl lost her father when she was a little girl, and therefore her older brother became her sole guardian. Accordingly, he expressed his desire to give his sister to my son as a legal wife. On approaching Omar and the legal justification, he said she has another minor brother and 3 sisters. Her mother is alive, but as a woman according to Islamic law, she cannot be the guardian of her daughter. Therefore, the only man legally empowered to decide on her behalf or to marry her to his choice is her older brother, Mr. Omar Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber. Accordingly, he expressed his desire to give his sister to my son as a legal wife. On the marriage contract and religious legitimacy. The bride's guardian, Umar, my son Hassan, the groom, the imam of the mosque, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, me, and many sheikhs gathered in the mosque, and we performed the marriage contract. The next day, I sent my son, the groom, Hassan, and the brother, the guardian, Omar, to the house of his bride, Intisar. On framing the act as benevolent, I told my son that it was normal for Intisar's mother to object because Omar is the son of her late husband's first wife. In other words, as rival wives they hate one another and their offspring dislikes each other too. I asked my son to wait until the older sister arrived and we could approach them again. Now I am so glad that you have come to us and brought with you my son's beautiful bride, Intisar. We are supposed to celebrate and rejoice today. On dismissing objections and asserting legality, Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali remains steadfast, insisting that the marriage is valid and that Intisar now belongs to his son Hassan as his legal wife. In summary, Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali justifies arranging the marriage by emphasizing his son's suffering, the legal authority of Omar as guardian, and the formal compliance with religious and legal procedures, while dismissing the lack of Intisar's consent and the objections of her family. How the marriage was conducted according to Islamic Sharia law. Legal guardian, wali under Sudanese Islamic law, a woman's marriage must be arranged by her legal male guardian, wali. In Intisar's case, her half-brother Omar was considered her legal guardian after the death of her father. This is because, according to the Sharia law, her mother Sarah and her sister Frida as women cannot be the guardians of her daughter. Therefore, the only man legally empowered to decide on her behalf or to marry her to his choice is her older brother, Mr. Omar Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber. Marriage contract. Nikah. The marriage contract was arranged and signed in the presence of the guardian, Omar, the groom, Hassan, the imam, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, and witnesses. The contract was performed in the mosque as is customary. The bride's guardian, Umar, my son Hassan, the groom, the imam of the mosque, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, me, and many sheikhs gathered in the mosque, and we performed the marriage contract. Witnesses and formalities. The marriage was witnessed by the required parties, and all names, addresses, and signatures were recorded by the imam, Mazun, who is authorized to conduct Islamic marriages. The marriage contract showed the names, addresses, and signatures of the 3 witnesses. The marriage contract also includes the name, address, and signature of the wife's older brother, who is her guardian. As a recognized imam and mazun, I found no reason to doubt the legality of the marriage contract. Absence of the bride's consent. According to the interpretation of Sharia law applied in the story, the bride's consent or presence was not required for the contract to be valid. The imam explains, a father or guardian brother can contract the marriage of his virgin daughter or his virgin sister without asking her consent, whatever her age. Religious legitimacy. The imam and the families involved considered the marriage fully legitimate under Islamic law, as all the formal requirements, guardian, witnesses, imam, and contract were fulfilled. Who is the girl's guardian? Frida asked. Her elder brother, Mr. Omar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. He was her guardian because she lost her father 10 years ago. He showed me his father's death certificate. I got a copy. The husband was present. Witnesses were present. Their names, addresses, and signatures were taken by me as a recognized mazun who conducted the halal Islamic marriage. In summary, the marriage was conducted according to the prevailing interpretation of Islamic law in Sudan by having the bride's male guardian, her half-brother, contract the marriage on her behalf in the presence of an imam and witnesses, with all formalities and documentation completed. The bride's consent or presence was not required for the contract to be considered valid under the Sharia law. After the failed visits of the friends to the houses of the imam and the politician, the lawyer Salah, who is also the boyfriend of Firdaus, explains to the 2 forced married sisters the house of obedience. Here's a detailed explanation of how the lawyer Salah explains to the 2 sisters, Intisar and Firdaus, the possibility of being taken to the house of obedience by the police. Summary of Salah's explanation. Salah, who is a recognized Sudanese lawyer and a close friend of the sisters, explains to Intisar and Firdaus that under Sudanese Islamic law, if a wife is deemed disobedient, nashiz, by her husband, the husband can file a complaint in the Sharia court. If the court issues a verdict of obedience, hukm al-ta'i, the wife is legally obliged to return to her husband's house and submit to his authority. If she refuses, the court can authorize the police to forcibly take her to the so-called House of Obedience, Beit al-Ta'i, where she can be detained until she submits or further penalties are imposed. Salah warns the sisters that this is not just a theoretical risk, but a real and imminent threat if their husbands or guardians pursue the legal process. Direct quotes from the text. Here are direct quotes and paraphrased passages from the novel that illustrate Salah's explanation. Salah says to the sisters, if the Sharia court issues a verdict of obedience against you, the police can come to your house at any time and forcibly take you to your husband's house, which is known as the House of Obedience. You will have no legal recourse to resist, and any attempt to do so may result in further punishment or even criminal charges for obstructing justice. According to the law, the so-called disobedient wife can be taken by force by the police to the House of Obedience. The judge of the Sharia court can issue an order, and the police will come to your house, arrest you, and deliver you to your husband's house, where you may be detained until you submit to his authority. Further details. Salah also explains that the process is not just a matter of family or community pressure, but is enforced by the state and its legal apparatus. He emphasizes that the sisters' refusal to comply with a verdict of obedience can result in them being labeled as criminals, and that the law is heavily biased in favor of the husband or male guardian. Salah's warning is meant to prepare the sisters for the possibility of police intervention and to encourage them to seek legal protection or consider escape if necessary. Summary table. Step. Explanation. 1. Husband files complaint in Sharia court for disobedience. 2. Court issues verdict of obedience, hukm al-ta'i. 3. Wife is legally obliged to return to husband's house. 4. If wife refuses, court authorizes police intervention. 5. Police can forcibly take wife to House of Obedience. 6. Wife may be detained until she submits or faces further penalties. The sisters' reactions. Intisar and Firdas react with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and outrage. They are shocked to learn that the law allows such treatment and that their own safety and autonomy can be so easily violated. Intisar, in particular, is terrified at the prospect of being dragged away by the police and forced to live with a man she does not love or has not chosen. Firdas, who is younger and more vulnerable, is also deeply affected, expressing anxiety and a sense of helplessness. Their reactions include fear. Both sisters are frightened by the idea of being arrested and forcibly taken away. Disbelief. They struggle to accept that the law can be so unjust and that their wishes count for nothing. Outrage. There is anger at the system that allows such abuse and at the family members who might be complicit. Desperation. They begin to consider escape as their only option, discussing plans to flee before the police can come for them. Direct quotes showing their reaction. The sisters became frightened when they heard that they might be taken by force by the police to the House of Obedience. Firdas asked, "What will happen to us if we refuse to go? Will they really drag us away like criminals?" Sulla replied, "Yes, they can and they will. That is why you must be prepared to escape before it is too late." Next steps. After Sulla's warning, the sisters and their friends begin to make concrete plans to avoid arrest and forced obedience. Escape. They discuss leaving the house and going into hiding, possibly fleeing to another city. Seeking help. They consider reaching out to sympathetic relatives, friends, or even foreign embassies for protection. Legal resistance. Sulla, as recognized Sudanese lawyer, promises to do everything he can within the law to delay or challenge the verdict, but he is honest about the limitations of the legal system. Here is a detailed summary of the visit of Frida and the four friends, Intisar, Firdas, Sami, and Sulla, to the office of Mr. Osman Al-Taib. Arrival and atmosphere. Frida and the four friends arrive at the office of Mr. Osman Al-Taib, who is a wealthy and influential businessman and also the father of Sami. The atmosphere is tense and formal. The group is determined to confront Mr. Osman Al-Taib about the forced marriage and the injustices committed against Intisar and her sister Firdas. Upon entering, they are received by Mr. Osman Al-Taib's secretary and then shown into his office. The office is described as grand and imposing, reflecting Mr. Osman Al-Taib's status and wealth. The group is aware that they are entering the domain of a powerful adversary. As soon as they enter, Mr. Osman Al-Taib shows them some photos of the four lovers, Sami, Intisar, Sulla, and Firdas. The photos that Mr. Osman Al-Taib shows to the Imam and Frida have a significant impact on the meeting and the perception of the four friends. These photos depict the four friends, Sami, Intisar, Sulla, and Firdas, in intimate or compromising situations, such as holding hands, hugging, or kissing in public places in Khartoum City. Mr. Osman Al-Taib uses these photos to shame and discredit the friends, especially Intisar, in front of the Imam and Frida, reinforcing the narrative that their behavior is immoral and dishonorable according to the prevailing social and religious norms. The photos are intended to justify Mr. Osman Al-Taib's opposition to Sami and Intisar's love relationship and to pressure Frida into accepting the forced marriages arrangements, while also influencing the Imam to support his stance. The photos most probably are secretly taken by a private investigator or spy hired by Mr. Osman Al-Taib. The locations where these photos are taken include various public places in Khartoum, such as the riverbank, hotels, restaurants, and cinemas, where the four friends spend time together during their trip to the capital city. The spy's purpose is to gather compromising material that can be used as leverage or evidence against the friends. The intention behind filming these moments is to gather evidence of the friends' immoral behavior, which Mr. Osman Al-Taib intends to use against them. Legally, the photos are used as evidence to accuse Intisar and her friends of immoral behavior, adultery, and violating social and religious norms. In the context of Sudanese Sharia law, Such images can be used to justify charges of adultery or indecency, which carry severe penalties, including flogging, imprisonment, or even death by stoning. The photos are later presented in court as part of the case against Intisar, and their existence is used to support the narrative that she is a disobedient wife and an adulteress, further endangering her legal and personal safety. After Intisar weeps due to the humiliation and exposure caused by the photo revealing her private parts, Sammy comforts her by holding her, reassuring her of his love, kissing her in front of others, and expressing that her dignity and worth are not diminished by the actions of others. He tries to calm her, wipes away her tears, kisses her lips, and reminds her that she is not to blame for the violation of her privacy. Sammy's support helps Intisar regain some sense of safety and emotional stability in the face of public shaming and trauma. The text says, Sammy saw Intisar weeping and immediately went to her. He put his arms around her and said, "Don't cry, my love. None of this is your fault. You are the victim here. I will always stand by you no matter what they say or do. I will fight for you and protect you from anyone who tries to hurt you." He wiped her tears and held her close, whispering words of comfort and love. She cried, "How could they do this to me? How could they let someone take such photos and show them to everyone?" Sammy said, "Don't cry, my love. None of this is your fault. You are the victim here. I will always stand by you no matter what they say or do." The photos are used by Mr. Osman Al-Taib as evidence to accuse Intisar of immoral behavior and to justify legal action against her. In the context of Sudanese law and Sharia, such photos can be used to accuse a woman of adultery or indecency, which can result in severe punishment, including flogging, imprisonment, or even death by stoning. The exposure of these photos puts Intisar at risk of prosecution and social ostracism. Sammy tries to comfort Intisar by reassuring her of his love and support, and by expressing his anger at the violation of her privacy. The text says, Sammy saw Intisar weeping and immediately went to her. He put his arms around her and said, "Don't cry, my love. None of this is your fault. You are the victim here. I will always stand by you no matter what they say or do. I will fight for you and protect you from anyone who tries to hurt you." He wiped her tears and held her close, whispering words of comfort and love. Here's a detailed explanation of how the photos shown by Mr. Osman Al-Taib affect Intisar's family, with direct quotations and context from the document. How the photos affect Intisar's family. When Mr. Osman Al-Taib shows the photos to the Imam and Frida, Intisar's older sister, during their visit to his office, the impact is profound and deeply distressing for Intisar and her family. The photos, which were secretly taken, show Intisar and her friends in moments of privacy and intimacy, including a photo that exposes Intisar's private parts. This exposure leads to intense shame, humiliation, and emotional pain for Intisar and causes a rift and further suffering within her family. Direct quotations and details. The photos are described as follows. Then the old man opened his bag and removed some pictures from it and gave them to his friend Maulana to show for himself. With each photo, the Imam's face turns from angry to serious to sad until it becomes very ugly. After that, the photos were transferred to the older sister Frida. Then Sammy's father told her to take a look at them and show them to her two sisters and their boyfriends. When the photos reached Sammy, he is shocked to see his and Intisar's photo kissing each other on the riverbank in Khartoum City. Then he saw the temperamental girl Firdaus freely offering her sweet lips to her new boyfriend Sulla under a tree. After that, he saw his beloved girlfriend Intisar lying on a bench on the bank of the river, with her head buried under his body. The photo also showed Intisar's legs exposed and her small red underwear clearly visible. The picture filled Sammy with intense indignation and anger. His wrath swelled when he saw her covering her face with her hands and starting to cry. Firdaus also started crying. Farida and Sulla bowed their heads. Nevertheless, the lover fell on his knees in front of his beloved, took her face in his hands, and looked into her beautiful eyes, which were full of tears. Then he kissed her sweet lips once, twice, and thrice, and the two intimate lovers entered into a deep intimacy and passionate kissing. Summary. The photos, especially the one exposing Intisar's private parts, cause her deep humiliation and emotional pain, leading her to weep openly in front of her family and friends. The exposure of these intimate moments intensifies the shame and stigma felt by Intisar's family, deepening their isolation and internal conflict. The family's inability to protect Intisar or shield her from public scandal and patriarchal control leads to a breakdown of trust, support, and unity within the family and becomes a catalyst for further tragedy. When Sami kisses Intisar in front of his father and the Imam, their reactions are intense and highly negative. Mr. Osman Al-Taib is shocked and furious. He interprets the public display of affection as open adultery and a direct challenge to his authority and values. He reacts by shouting at Sami and Intisar, calling them adulterers and prostitutes, and orders them to leave his office. He is described as trembling, sweating, and foaming at the mouth with rage. He also threatens to disown Sami and refuses to accept Intisar as a daughter-in-law, declaring that he will never allow their relationship to continue. The Imam is equally scandalized. He closes his eyes to avoid witnessing the kiss, considering it a haram, forbidden, and immoral act. The Imam supports Mr. Osman Al-Taib's condemnation and joins in denouncing the couple, reinforcing the idea that their behavior is unacceptable in their society and religion. Here is a direct summary from the text. When the two lovers continued to hold each other and kiss unceasingly, Mr. Osman Al-Taib rose to his feet and shouted at them in the loud voice of an angry ogre. "Get out of my office, you four adulterers, and the fifth of you is a gay and lesbian woman, and she is a whore too." The so-called blessed Maulana, who has never kissed any of his four wives and has never seen a kiss before, has closed his old eyes. He does not want to see the act of haram and immorality happening in front of him between an unmarried girl and a bachelor boy. Al-Sayed Osman Al-Taib interpreted his son and his fiancée's bold act as open adultery, and prostitution is disguised as forbidden love. Accordingly, he started trembling and sweating and his mouth was foaming. In summary, both the Imam and Mr. Osman Al-Taib are outraged and deeply offended by the kiss, viewing it as a grave violation of social, religious, and familial norms. Their reaction is one of condemnation, anger, and rejection. After Intisar is deeply distressed by the exposure of her private parts in the photos shown by Mr. Osman Al-Taib, Sami tries to comfort her with empathy and reassurance. He acknowledges her embarrassment and pain, and he attempts to shift her perspective by focusing on their love and the injustice of the situation. Sami tells Intisar that the exposure is not her fault and that she should not feel ashamed for something done to her against her will. He tries to console her by reminding her of their bond and by offering emotional support in the face of humiliation and family distress. Here is a direct quote from the text describing Sami's comfort. Sami reassures his beloved fiancée, telling her, "Embarrassing? Intisar, this is the first time anyone has blessed us instead of cursing us. Let's enjoy it." This passage shows Sami's attempt to comfort Intisar by reframing the situation and focusing on their shared experience and resilience, rather than the shame imposed by others. The confrontation. Once inside, Mr. Osman Al-Taib greets them with a mixture of politeness and underlying hostility. He is aware of the purpose of their visit and is prepared to defend his actions. The conversation quickly becomes confrontational. Frida, acting as the spokesperson, directly challenges Mr. Osman Al-Taib about the forced marriage of Intisar to Hassan and the role he played in orchestrating it. She accuses him of using his influence and wealth to manipulate the legal and religious systems for his own benefit. Direct quote. Mr. Osman Al-Taib responds by downplaying the seriousness of the situation, framing it as a misunderstanding and justifying his actions as being in the best interests of his family and community. He insists that the marriage was conducted according to the law and tradition, and that any objections are simply the result of youthful rebellion and misunderstanding. He tells a long story, presenting himself as a defender of tradition and family honor, and attempts to justify the forced marriage by referencing social norms and the need to protect his son from a bad match. The friends' reactions. The friends, especially Intisar and Sami, are visibly upset by Mr. Osman Al-Taib's dismissive attitude. Sami, in particular, is angered by his father's refusal to acknowledge the harm caused by his actions. The group tries to reason with him, presenting evidence of the injustice and the suffering caused to Intisar and her family. Sulla, the lawyer, attempts to steer the conversation towards legal and ethical grounds, but Mr. Osman Al-Taib remains unmoved, relying on his authority and the legitimacy of tradition. The friends' role. During the meeting, Frida and the friends support Sami and Intisar. Frida, in particular, is vocal in defending her sister's right to choose her own partner and challenges the legitimacy of the forced marriage. The friends collectively express their disapproval of the patriarchal and classist attitudes displayed by Mr. Osman Al-Taib. The outcome and next steps. The confrontation ends with Mr. Osman Al-Taib refusing to accept Intisar as a daughter-in-law and cutting off the conversation. Sami, however, makes a bold declaration of his unwavering love and commitment to Intisar, even if it means defying his father and the entire social order. After leaving the office, the friends regroup and discuss their next steps. They are determined to continue fighting for Intisar's rights and to challenge the forced marriage through legal and social means. Summary table. Character. Stance/action. Mr. Osman Al-Taib insists on wealth/status, rejects Intisar, tries to force Sami to comply. Sami defends love for Intisar, rejects classism, vows to fight for their union. Frida defends her sisters, challenges forced marriages, plans legal/social action. Friends Sulla Furtus supports Sami and Intisar, oppose patriarchal and classist attitudes. Here are more direct quotes and further details from the conversation between Frida, the four friends, and Mr. Osman Al-Taib, Sami's father, during their visit to his office, as depicted in the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife. Direct quotes from the text. On social status and marriage. Mr. Osman Al-Taib, greatness and suitability in marriage are determined by wealth, family status, and noble lineage, not by love or personal qualities. You must never speak to me about that girl Intisar again, nor about her family. I don't want to know anything about her or have my name associated with her family. Sami, no power in heaven above or authority in the whole world can separate me from Intisar or prevent me from marrying her. On the confrontation. Mr. Osman Al-Taib, shut up, Sami, shouted Mr. Osman Al-Taib. I have given you enough time for today. I wouldn't mind talking another day about Malana's daughter. If you want to see her before we go to her father, I can arrange that for you. But you must never speak to me about that girl Intisar again, nor about her family. I don't want to know anything about her or have my name associated with her or her family. Sami, father, I will not talk to you any more about my beloved girlfriend Intisar, because I have already spoken today. However, there is one last thing I want to tell you. No power in heaven above or authority in the whole world can separate me from Intisar or prevent me from marrying her. On the friend's support. Frida, to Mr. Osman, she is not property to be traded or sold, and she has the right to choose her own life partner. I will not allow this injustice to stand. Frida, to her friends, we must unite to defend Intisar's rights. I will not rest until her freedom is restored and the forced marriage is overturned. Further details on the conversation. Mr. Osman Al-Taib tries to steer the conversation towards his own values, repeatedly emphasizing the importance of marrying within one's social class and dismissing the idea of love as a basis for marriage. He offers to arrange a meeting with a great family's daughter, but refuses to even discuss Intisar further. Sami stands firm, calmly but passionately defending his love for Intisar and rejecting his father's classist logic. He points out the contradictions in his father's arguments and insists that personal merit and love are more important than wealth or lineage. Frida and the friends support Sammy and Intisar, with Frida especially vocal in challenging the legitimacy of the forced marriage and vowing to fight for her sister's rights. The confrontation is tense, with Mr. Osman ultimately cutting off the conversation and refusing to accept Intisar as a daughter-in-law. Aftermath and next steps. After leaving the office, the friends regroup and discuss their next steps. Frida plans to seek legal action to challenge the forced marriage, rally support from the community, and prepare to take the case to court if necessary. Next steps. After a lengthy and fruitless discussion, it becomes clear that Mr. Osman Al-Taib is not willing to take responsibility or offer any meaningful solution. The group leaves the office frustrated but more determined to seek justice through other means, such as legal action and public advocacy. They resolve to continue fighting for Intisar's rights, to challenge the forced marriage in court, and to expose the abuses of power that have taken place. Frida throws her shoe at the face of Mr. Osman Al-Taib as an act of protest and defiance against his arrogance, cruelty, and the injustice he represents. During the heated confrontation in his office, Mr. Osman Al-Taib insults and dismisses the worth of Intisar and her family, insisting on his authority and social status, and refusing to accept Sammy's love for Intisar. His words are deeply offensive and provoke Frida's anger. The shoe throwing is a culturally significant gesture, symbolizing contempt and a refusal to submit to his oppressive authority. It is a turning point in the confrontation, showing that Frida and her friends will not accept the injustice and humiliation imposed by Mr. Osman Al-Taib. Direct quote from the text. When Frida heard the sarcastic words of Sammy's father, she took off her shoe and threw it at his face. The old man jumped back and the shoe hit the wall. Frida ran to him, but Sulla prevented her. While Sulla was holding her, she spat on the old man's face. This act is a powerful symbol of resistance and the refusal to be silenced or oppressed by patriarchal authority. The aftermath. After the shoe is thrown, the situation becomes chaotic. Frida attempts to physically attack Mr. Osman Al-Taib, but is restrained by Sulla. She then spits on Mr. Osman Al-Taib, further expressing her contempt. The confrontation ends with Mr. Osman Al-Taib threatening the group, declaring that he will use his power and influence to ensure that Intisar is forced to comply with the marriage and that none of them will be able to stop him. Before today, the old geezer Mr. Osman exclaimed, "I was not interested in my marriage to Firdas, and I did it to protect my name from being spoiled by my bad boy. But now that you have humiliated and challenged me in my office and set my son against me, I will demand, through Sharia court, that my fourth wife, Firdos Ibrahim Mustafa Jaber, come and live with me in my house." "As long as I am alive," Frida cried, "neither you nor the dirty politician's son Hassan can touch even one finger of my two sisters." Sammy says to his father, "Until today I call you Dad. But if you persist in these evil plots, I will never use that honorable name again. I will call you an insolent old man and evil conspirator, and I will fight you and your partners in crime. Especially this cunning fox, the imam of the mosque, who exploits religious authority to justify his evil actions." Emotional impact. The aftermath leaves the group shaken but resolute. Frida's actions symbolize a breaking point, showing that the family will no longer submit to Mr. Osman Al-Taib's authority or intimidation. The friends reaffirm their commitment to protect Intisar, and Firdas resist the two forced marriages, even as Mr. Osman Al-Taib vows revenge and further legal action. Here's a detailed explanation of the sarcastic words spoken by Sammy's father, Mr. Osman Al-Taib, which provoke Frida to throw her shoe at his face, along with direct quotes and context from the text. Context of the confrontation. When Frida and the four friends, including Sammy, visit Mr. Osman Al-Taib in his office, the conversation quickly becomes tense and confrontational. Mr. Osman is depicted as a wealthy, powerful, and deeply patriarchal man who is determined to prevent his son from marrying Intisar, a girl from a poor family. He is dismissive and sarcastic towards Frida and the group, especially regarding the idea of marriage based on love rather than wealth and status. Sarcastic words leading to the shoe throwing. During the heated exchange, Mr. Osman Al-Taib makes several sarcastic and demeaning remarks about the value of women, marriage, and social status. He mocks the idea that Sammy should marry for love, and instead insists that greatness is determined by wealth and lineage. Here are some direct quotes and paraphrased lines from the text. On the definition of a great woman. Well, father, what is your definition of a great woman? Like I said, she must be from a big family. For example, the daughter of Maulana Sheikh Marzouk satisfies my definition of a great woman because her parents are great and noble and have pure Arab blood. Her father is the most honest imam in our city. Her mother traced her ethnicity back to our blessed Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Her father traced his ancestry to Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad too. The girl knows the Holy Quran by heart. She can read the holy book from cover to cover without looking at it. She is a blessed young woman and a well-behaved girl. She has just completed 12th grade and passed her exams with a high score. She is the most desired of all the girls in this city. Every family in our society wants her to become the future wife of one of their sons. On the value of wealth and status. My dear son, how can we call Ibn al-Fakir, or the son of a poor man, a great man? So, a great man is an educated person from a rich and influential family. These advantages combined make a person a great man. On the marriage proposal. My dear son Sammy, 3 wealthy families asked for the imam's daughter in marriage, but her father rejected their proposals. Of course, he had his own reasons for refusing their requests, but that is none of our business. What is important to us is that he accepted our proposal. You must tell me, Dad, why he refused the other 3 proposals, and he accepted yours. The boys were rejected on the basis of their family backgrounds. What is wrong with their family backgrounds? I'm not entirely sure of the exact details, but your mother will be able to tell you. What I've heard is that their family's ethnic backgrounds are not clean. In other words, the virtuous imam came to know that these families had African roots from the Nuba, Darfur, Dinka, Zaghawa, Masalit tribes, and the like of black Africans. On Frida's ability to act. Yes, I am their sole breadwinner and guardian, and if you or this impudent old man have any objections, I will cut out your tongue and his tongue. Mr. Osman Al-Taib said sarcastically that if a woman becomes an axe, she will not cut anyone's head off. When Frida heard the sarcastic words of Sammy's father, she took off her shoe and threw it at his face. The old man jumped back and the shoe hit the wall. Frida ran to him, but Sulla prevented her. While Sulla was holding her, she spat on the old man's face. Aftermath of the confrontation. After Frida throws her shoe at Mr. Osman Al-Taib, the situation escalates further. She attempts to physically confront him, but is restrained by Sulla. The confrontation ends with harsh words and a clear rift between the two sides. Before we leave, I want to remind you that Firdaus is neither your Muslim 4th wife nor a slave girl whom Omar sold and you bought her from him. She has every right to decide who she loves to marry. For that reason, neither the Sharia court nor the police nor even this religious fraud man can force her to come to your house. I forewarned you that you should not think that your money or any power in this country could allow you to enslave and mistreat us. When Frida gave her last words to Mr. Osman Al-Taib, she left the office, followed by her 2 younger sisters and their boyfriends. In summary, Frida throws her shoe at Mr. Osman Al-Taib because of his repeated sarcastic, dismissive, and misogynistic remarks about women, marriage, and social status, as well as his belittling of her role as a guardian and his insistence on treating women as property. The confrontation is a powerful moment of resistance against patriarchal authority and social injustice, and it marks a turning point in the narrative, highlighting the courage and determination of Frida and her friends. Sammy kisses Intisar in his father's office, in front of the imam of the mosque and other friends, as a bold act of love and defiance against the oppressive social and religious forces trying to separate them. This moment occurs after intense confrontation with his father, Mr. Osman Al-Taib, who is determined to prevent Sammy from marrying Intisar due to differences in wealth and social status. And after the imam and others have tried to justify the forced marriage of Intisar to Hassan. Sammy's kiss is a public declaration that his love for Intisar is genuine and unbreakable, and it symbolizes his refusal to submit to his father's authority, the imam's religious arguments, or the social norms that condemn their relationship. It is also an act of comfort and solidarity for Intisar, who is being humiliated and treated as property. Direct quotation from the text. The friends, especially Intisar and Sammy, are visibly upset by Mr. Osman Al-Taib's dismissive attitude. Sammy, in particular, is angered by his father's refusal to acknowledge the harm caused by his actions. The group tries to reason with him, presenting evidence of the injustice and the suffering caused to Intisar and her family. Sammy, however, stands his ground, calmly but passionately defending his love for Intisar and rejecting his father's classist logic. He points out the contradictions in his father's arguments and insists that personal merit and love are more important than wealth or lineage. The confrontation is tense, with Mr. Osman ultimately cutting off the conversation and refusing to accept Intisar as a daughter-in-law. During the meeting, Frida and the friends support Sammy and Intisar, with Frida especially vocal in challenging the legitimacy of the forced marriage and vowing to fight for her sister's rights. The confrontation ends with Mr. Osman Al-Taib refusing to accept Intisar as a daughter-in-law and cutting off the conversation. Sammy, however, makes a bold declaration of his unwavering love and commitment to Intisar, even if it means defying his father and the entire social order. Mr. Osman Al-Taib compares his late wife Rasha with his new wife Firdaus because he sees a physical and emotional resemblance between the two, which triggers complex feelings of nostalgia, loss, and desire. In the narrative, after the confrontation with Intisar's family and friends, Mr. Osman Al-Taib is left alone with the imam and begins to reminisce about his late wife Rasha, describing her physical features and personality in detail. He notes that Firdaus, his new and much younger wife, reminds him of Rasha in her beauty, body shape, and even her mannerisms. This comparison is not only a reflection of his unresolved grief over Rasha's death, but also reveals his problematic attitudes towards women, as he objectifies both Rasha and Firdaus and sees the new marriage as a way to recapture what he lost with his late wife. Here is a direct quote from the text. The old man suddenly stopped crying and said sadly that this little girl Firdaus reminds me of my late fourth wife, Rasha. I swear to God she is like her twin. Since Rasha died in the hospital at the time of her firstborn delivery, I have never forgotten her. Today when I saw this little girl Firdaus, I thought Rasha had come back to life. The same sexy body, the same height and big buttocks, the same beautiful eyes and breasts high above the chest, the same sweet lips and narrow waist, the same straight nose, eyebrows, white even teeth, and the same long hair. My heart yearns for one day with Rasha in bed. This comparison is significant because it exposes Mr. Osman Al-Taib's emotional motivations for marrying Firdaus, and it also foreshadows the tragic fate that awaits her as he projects his unresolved longing for Rasha onto Firdaus, treating her less as an individual and more as a replacement for his lost wife. Here is how Mr. Osman Al-Taib narrates his beautiful days with his late bride Rasha to the imam, based on the content of the document. After the confrontation with his family and the friends of Intisar, Mr. Osman Al-Taib becomes emotional and begins to reminisce about his late wife, Rasha. He describes her as his little princess, recalling her beauty, innocence, and the joy she brought to his life. He shares with the imam that Rasha was only 13 years old when he married her, and that she died after 1 year of marriage due to complications from childbirth. He paints a vivid picture of their time together, saying, "She used to call me Uncle Osman, and I used to call her my little princess Rasha. Whenever I come home, I find her either singing like a little nightingale bird with her sweet voice or lying on the sofa and watching TV. Her favorite channel is Cartoon International Network. Her favorite show was Mickey Mouse. She also loved Barbie, Tom, and Jerry. As soon as I entered the house, she would come running and say that Uncle Osman has come. Then her hands searched my pockets for the chocolate. I have never disappointed her any day. Sometimes, I found her little girlfriends playing with her. Whenever they saw me, they would run to their parents. Many times, I stopped them and allowed them to continue playing with my little wife. He expresses deep sorrow over her loss, saying, "She was only 13 years old when I married her, and I was 64. She died after 1 year of our happy married life. She died due to a cesarean surgery during her first childbirth. Even her young child died with her. If I had known that she would die of childbirth, I would not have made her pregnant at that young underage." And again, the old man began to weep and shed many tears of sorrow. This narration is filled with nostalgia and regret, highlighting both the affection Mr. Osman Al-Taib felt for Rasha and the pain of her untimely death. The Imam listens and later tries to comfort him, but the passage above captures the essence of how Mr. Osman Al-Taib recalls his days with his late bride. When Mr. Osman Al-Taib is grieving the loss of his late wife Rasha, the Imam, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, tries to comfort him by drawing on religious and cultural beliefs. The Imam tells Mr. Osman that Rasha is now in heaven waiting for him, and that when he dies, he will be reunited with her and, according to Islamic teachings, will also be granted 72 beautiful virgins in paradise. The Imam says, "Be brave and patient, Mr. Osman. She is now in heaven waiting for you to die and come to her. You will see her again and she will not be alone, but God will give you 72 beautiful virgin girls eternal. Then your joy will be forever." This reassurance is meant to provide solace by promising a spiritual reunion and eternal happiness in line with traditional Islamic views of the afterlife. The Imam's words are intended to help Mr. Osman cope with his grief and loss by focusing on religious hope and reward. The Imam continues, "Then the Imam realized that his words did not comfort his crying friend, so he approached him and whispered in his ears, 'Do not forget that God has given you another twin from Rasha. She is beautiful as her name Firdaus means paradise. She will be your heaven on earth.'" These last words of Maulana fell like dew from heaven on the grieving old man's heart. So, they made him happy like a groom who is about to spend his honeymoon with his beautiful underage virgin bride. These quotations show the Imam using religious imagery and promises of reunion in the afterlife, as well as drawing a parallel between the late child bride Rasha and the living child bride Firdaus. To comfort the so-called lawful groom of the underage bride Firdaus, Mr. Osman Al-Taib in his grief. Here's a comparison of the roles of the Imam, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk, Mr. Osman Al-Taib, and Mr. Mahjoub Al-Hilali in the conspiracy of the forced marriages of Intisar and Firdaus, as depicted in the novel, The Verdict of Obedience Against the Muslim Wife. The Imam. Role: the Imam acts as the religious authority and legal facilitator for the forced marriages. He is the Mazun, marriage registrar, who performs and legitimizes the marriage contracts for both Intisar and Firdaus, despite the absence of their consent. Actions: he accepts Omar, the half-brother, as the legal guardian, does not investigate the true wishes or best interests of the girls, and relies solely on the presence of a male guardian and the formalities required by Sharia law. He is depicted as complicit, using his religious authority to rubber-stamp the marriages and ignore the girls' autonomy. Motivation: the Imam is motivated by his alliance with the city's powerful men and by his own interests. He wishes to see his own daughter Samia married to the son of the richest man in the city of Gadaref, Mr. Osman Al-Taib, and thus has a personal stake in separating Sami from Intisar. Mr. Osman Al-Taib. Role: Mr. Osman Al-Taib is the wealthy patriarch and the primary instigator of the conspiracy. He is the father of Sami and the man who ultimately marries Firdaus, Intisar's younger sister, against her will. Actions: he uses his wealth and influence to orchestrate the forced marriages, bribing Omar to act as guardian and pushing the Imam to perform the contracts. He is depicted as the mastermind, manipulating the legal and religious systems to serve his own interests and to prevent his son from marrying Intisar, whom he deems socially inferior. Motivation: his motivation is to maintain family honor, social status, and control over his children's choices. He is also driven by personal desire, as he wishes to add Firdaus as a young wife to his harem, exploiting the system for his own gratification. Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali. Role: Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali is a prominent politician and the father of Hassan, who becomes Intisar's forced husband. He is a key collaborator in the conspiracy, working alongside Mr. Osman and the Imam. Actions: he supports and encourages his son's pursuit of Intisar, even after repeated rejection. He participates in the arrangement with Omar and the Imam, and helps to legitimize the marriage contract through his political influence. He also provides social and legal cover for the conspiracy, ensuring that the forced marriage is accepted by the community. Motivation: his motivation is to secure a desirable marriage for his son and to maintain alliances with other powerful men in the city. He is also depicted as self-interested, using his position to manipulate outcomes for his family's benefit. Summary table. Role/person. Function in conspiracy. Motivation: Imam, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk. Performs and legitimizes forced marriages, ignores girls' consent, acts as religious authority. Personal alliances, own daughter's marriage. Mr. Osman al-Taib. Mastermind, bribes, manipulates, and orchestrates forced marriages, marries Firdaus. Honor, control, personal gratification. Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali. Political collaborator, supports son's forced marriage, legitimizes contract. Family benefit alliances. In essence, all three men play distinct but complementary roles in the conspiracy. The Imam provides religious and legal legitimacy. Mr. Osman al-Taib masterminds and manipulates the process for personal and social gain. And Mr. Mahjoub al-Hilali uses his political power to support and protect the arrangement. Together, they exploit the patriarchal and legal systems to strip Intisar and Firdaus of their autonomy and dignity. The social consequences of the forced marriages of Intisar and Firdaus, as depicted in the verdict of obedience against the Muslim wife, are profound and far-reaching. 1. Destruction of family bonds. Forced marriages orchestrated by patriarchal authority figures and religious leaders lead to deep divisions, betrayals, and the breakdown of trust within families. Intisar and Firdaus are betrayed by their half-brother Omar, who acts as their legal guardian for personal gain, and by other relatives who are complicit or powerless to intervene. This results in lasting trauma, resentment, and the shattering of familial support systems. 2. Social stigma and ostracism. Women subjected to forced marriage face social stigma, gossip, and isolation. Intisar, for example, is labeled a bad girl for resisting her forced marriage and for her relationship with Sami. The community turns against her, classmates and neighbors shun her, and even her mother is pressured to stop supporting her. This ostracism extends to the entire family, who are seen as tainted by scandal. 3. Perpetuation of gender inequality. The forced marriages reinforce and perpetuate patriarchal norms, denying women agency and autonomy. Women are treated as property to be exchanged, and their wishes are disregarded in favor of male guardians' decisions. This entrenches gender inequality and normalizes the subjugation of women in society. 4. Psychological trauma and loss of dignity. Victims of forced marriage experience severe psychological trauma, including depression, anxiety, and a sense of powerlessness. The humiliation of being married off without consent, and in some cases subjected to marital rape or violence, leads to lasting emotional scars and a loss of personal dignity. 5. Cycle of violence and abuse. The system of forced marriage, legitimized by religious and legal authorities, enables and perpetuates cycles of violence, physical, sexual, and emotional, against women. Firdaus, for example, is subjected to abuse and ultimately tortured as a result of the violence inflicted upon her in a forced marriage. 6. Community complicity and hypocrisy. The broader community, including religious leaders, neighbors, and even some family members, are complicit in upholding the system of forced marriage. There is widespread hypocrisy, as those in power manipulate religious and legal norms for personal gain while justifying or ignoring the suffering of women. 7. Suppression of love and individual choice. Forced marriages destroy the possibility of genuine love and partnership. Intisar and Sammy's love is condemned and sabotaged, and both are driven to despair and, at times, suicidal thoughts. The denial of the right to choose one's partner leads to widespread unhappiness and the suppression of individual desires. In summary, the forced marriages of Intisar and Firdaus result in the destruction of families, social ostracism, perpetuation of gender inequality, psychological trauma, cycles of violence, community complicity, and the suppression of love and personal choice. These consequences are not just personal tragedies, but reflect and reinforce the broader injustices and dysfunctions of the society depicted in the novel.